Hello, John Muchler here, pastor at the Ferndale Alliance Church, and we're starting a new section today, Matthew chapter 5. We're going to cover verses 21 through 26 over the next few days, but the first thing we need to do is sort of get the big picture, get the lay of the land, sort of get the 30,000 foot view of things, because Jesus just laid down a really heavy-duty point and principle in verse 20. That's where we left off last time. Verse 20 says this: I'm going to tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. What Jesus says there, your righteousness has got to be better. You've got to one-up the Pharisees. And if you don't, you're not going to get into the kingdom of heaven. That had to have left all of their heads spinning. And Jesus knew that. And so he tells them not just one example or illustration, not two, not four, but he goes on for the rest of chapter 5 to share 6 different illustrations as to what he means by your righteousness must surpass that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, who were the most religious people. They were people that on the outside at least were considered good, righteous, just. They were the godly ones. And I mentioned before, with all due respect, a Pharisee would be looked upon much like if we could combine Mother Teresa and Billy Graham. So this left the disciples' heads spinning. Jesus knew that, and so he's going to explain himself with these 6 stories, these 6 illustrations, these 6 applications of what he means. And he does so with this wonderful pattern. Each of these begins with a phrase such as, "You have heard," or "it was written," and then he quotes an Old Testament commandment or principle. Then he says these words, "But I tell you." So you've heard this, but I'm going to tell you something, not to contradict it, not to negate it, but to expand upon it to a higher level. And then he does what my professor in seminary, Klaus Blockmuhl, said. He radicalizes that original commandment, that original principle, to get right down to the gut, the heart of the matter. And in doing this, he reveals an awful lot about God and about himself. And so what I'd like to do today is not get into the details, but to simply read, without really any explanation or exposition at all, these 6 examples. And I believe just hearing the message, the message read, just heard, is going to have an impact in your life. This is how it was originally done anyway. Jesus simply preached these words. It was up to the disciples, the hearers, those that were climbing the mountain with Christ. This is the Sermon on the Mount. They were climbing with Christ to a higher level of spirituality and relationship with God. They just heard it and then let it sink in. So let me read these words to you. We're simply looking at 6 examples of applying this principle. Your righteousness has to surpass that of the religious people of the time. So if you have a Bible, you can just turn or just listen to Matthew chapter 5. I'm going to start back at verse 20 and then go straight through these 6 examples. "For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven." Now we're at verse 21, first illustration. "You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder.' And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you," here's where Jesus shifts to radicalizing the commandment, "but I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, 'Raka,'" we'll cover that later, "is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, 'You fool,' will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift on the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First, go be reconciled to them, and then come, offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. That was the first illustration, and the rest are quite a bit shorter. Here's the second illustration to make his point. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right hand causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. And don't gouge your eye out until we've covered this passage, by the way. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. Don't cut off anything, please. That's not the point here, but we will get to it. It is better for you to lose part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. Here's the third illustration. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. And we're going to spend a little time on that, so hang in there. Here's the fourth illustration. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes and no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Here's our fifth illustration, or Jesus' fifth example of how our righteousness must surpass. You have heard that it was said, I'm at verse 38, you have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek as well. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to walk 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. And now the sixth and final illustration and example of Jesus radicalizing. And by the way, already you can just sense he's definitely radicalizing these commandments. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous. And if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others are doing? Do not even pagans do that? So, and here's the wrap up. Last verse of chapter 5. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And so that is our introduction, kind of our big picture look at this great passage. A lot of difficult and challenging things in there. We're going to look at it together as we work our way through the rest of this Matthew chapter 5, which is part of the Sermon on the Mount. I look forward to doing that. I look forward to seeing you, and we'll see you next time.